Hello, and here we are for the discussion of pricing concepts and pricing strategies. So, this will be the third of the four keys of the marketing mix that we will discuss, and I will combine both pricing concepts and pricing strategies into one video. So, let's start with a definition of price. And pardon me while I read a definition. There's a number of different definitions of price that exist. So price can refer to the sum of all values that customers are willing to give up in order to gain benefit from a good or service. So price refers to the sum of all values that customers are willing to give up in order to gain benefits from a good or service. And what that means is you say, "Yeah, what does that mean?" Well, one of the things that notice that the definition or that definition of price does not include money, and price does not have to involve money. Now, in the world we live in 2016, many pricing situations involve money, but they don't have to. Um, if, for example, if I decided to teach this course, I am teaching this course, and it's the way that you have paid for this course, the price is a you know there was money involved, right? However, it would be perfectly okay if I said, I'll take money from that student and I'll take money from that student, but you sit there and say, I got 7 cows. 7 cows equals 3 credits for a principles of marketing course. If I agree to that, if you agree to that, voila, we have a price. 3 credits, principles of marketing in the summer, 7 cows. Not a problem. So again, the sum of all values that customers are willing to give up in order to gain benefit from a good or service, right? And the thing with price, and a really important thing with price, it's a very flexible component of the marketing mix. It is really easy and really fast to change prices. And that ability to change prices has certainly been facilitated by the advent of technology or increasing refinements in technology. You have you can look in probably one of the really good examples of how flexible pricing can be is again Amazon, where you can look at the price of a product maybe at 10 o'clock and it'll be one thing, and if you go back in a half hour it may be higher or lower, kind of depending on what's happened in the last half hour. So, one of the things with price, and particularly in the world that we live in, is it's a very flexible component of the marketing mix, unlike the channel stuff that we talked about. You start thinking about building logistic systems, you start thinking about building channels, you start thinking about working with retailers. You cannot change those kinds of things anywhere near as quickly as you can change the price of a product. So we're going to look at two primary things. We're going to look at pricing concepts, and then we're going to talk about pricing strategies. And a couple things to keep in mind with pricing concepts. And one is, the influence that macro environmental factors can have on pricing. So the importance of understanding things like economic conditions, right? One of the things that you responded to for one of the discussions involved the smaller portion sizes or the smaller serving sizes in India, right? And part of the reason for that is that the sachet concept is because, there's a lower, um, average income in India than in a number of other countries, and people, simply can't afford to buy larger quantities of a particular product. In that case, it was, things like shampoo. So you package it in a much smaller uh, container, and you offer a lower price. Um, things in terms of, how well is the, economy performing? Is the economy growing? Is the economy not growing? Right? When you're in a recession tends to have an interesting impact on pricing, because people can become much more concerned with the price of a product, and they're looking for more, value in things. So, price can be impacted by economic conditions. Technology is another issue. I mean, you look at I look at, how I used to make airplane reservations, and used to call up an airline, or maybe you call up a travel agent. Well, now, if you call up an airline, and you make a reservation, using airline personnel, they'll charge you money. In some cases, right? Whereas if you go back to when I was your age, if you called up an airline and spoke with a travel agent, or spoke with an airline reservation person, they preferred that rather than you going through the travel agency, because the airline was guaranteed of getting 100% of the revenues when you were calling the airline directly. Whereas when it went through a travel agent, the travel agent would, take commission based on the price of the airline ticket. So, now you have technology having an impact on prices, where, you know, the Travelocities of the world, an individual airline's website that's virtually costless. And again, airlines would prefer that you use their websites, because again, they don't have to pay, they don't have to pay the finder's fee for the Travelocities or the Expedias of the world. And your book talks about, with respect to pricing concepts, your book talks about the 5C framework, which is very effective and a very good framework to look at, pricing from. And so the 5Cs, it's called the 5C framework because each of the components of the framework begins with the letter C. So the first one that's talked about is company objective, and that those are illustrated in Exhibit 14.2, and you get the sense for, depending on what your company is attempting to achieve with pricing, what kinds of things that's going to impact in terms of strategy, which is, when we get that's the next part of this discussion. So if you're, for example, if you're looking, if your focus as an organization, or your objective as an organization is profit, that's going to lead you to looking at pricing through a different lens than if you're focused on sales, right? Sales, you're trying to, maximize your organization's sales, and oftentimes what that means is dropping prices so that you can maximize sales. Whereas when you're looking towards a profit consideration, you might be looking at situations where you want to have a certain return on every sale. So, very in the book talks about competitor orientation, as well as a customer orientation. So again, the company objectives when one is pricing is important. Second C of the 5C framework involves customers, and this is where we get into the fun stuff of demand curves and demand elasticities, and all sorts of things of that nature. So, there's a necessity for organizations when they're thinking about pricing to have an understanding of customers, and have an understanding of the demand curve, and have an understanding of demand elasticities. And, remember that demand elasticity refers to sensitivity to changes in price. And so when you have inelastic demand, you have a situation where changes in price doesn't really lead to very big changes in demand. Whereas if you have a price elastic situation, changes in price will lead to relatively large changes in demand. And having an understanding of, maybe what your market is or what different segments entail means that an organization should be able to do a better job with pricing. So, if we go back to the airlines, a number of airlines recognize that there's, you know, uh, business travel, and business travel tends to be more price inelastic than does pleasure travel, the other kind of travel. So what you'll see with inelastic pricing is there's a lot less flexibility and prices tend to be a lot higher, whereas with the leisure travel, um, people are going to be a lot more sensitive to what the airfares are. And one of the key things is if you identify different segments having different demand elasticity or different price elasticities, when you're faced with a situation with inelastic demand, it really doesn't make a lot of sense as a marketer to drop your prices in that situation. In fact, it may make sense to raise your prices because you're really not going to have that big of an impact on demand. Um, Third C in the 5C framework is cost, and this brings in all the fun stuff that you might have learned about in accounting 201, accounting 202, or econ 201 or econ 202, where you have your fixed cost, your variable cost, your total cost, and your marginal cost, and those have important implications from a pricing perspective. So one of the things that you'll often see, um, for example, when an organization has excess capacity, um, it'll do things to try to increase the usage of its facilities. So I remember a number of years ago, this isn't as prevalent today, but a number of years ago, I went to a Cleveland Indians game. Actually, this was back in the 1980s, and they were running a promotion and it was a pricing promotion that the head of the household, that was me, paid full price, whereas anybody else who came with me, my girlfriend at the time and a friend at the time, they paid half price. And so part of the reason you could do that was because, look, the cost of that game was fixed. Right, they were going to play the game, and there was a whole bunch of empty seats in the stadium, and getting somebody in at full price and other people in at a partial price at least helped to contribute something to the fixed expenses of the game. More recently, and because of like I said before, the fact that pricing is such a flexible component of the marketing mix, a lot of professional sports teams now use something called dynamic pricing, which that's basically what Amazon does. Dynamic pricing is the Amazon model where prices are changing based on a whole bunch of different factors. And dynamic pricing, with respect to Major League Baseball in particular, a lot of people are upset about it because they don't understand why you pay a lot less for if you're going to a game for the Indians, for example, in April. It's cold. It's early in the season. The game probably doesn't mean as much. You might be playing a really bad team. The price for that game might be a lot lower than, let's say, earlier in July this year when the Yankees came through and the weather was warmer, the Indians were playing well, and the Yankees are often a popular team to play. Okay, so we talked about cost. There's competition, and the competition, the fourth of the 5C framework. Competition is that's where an understanding of the market structure in a particular industry becomes important. So, do we have a perfectly competitive industry? They don't really exist. Do we have a monopolistic, is our industry characterized by a monopolistic competition? Is it an oligopoly? Is it a monopoly? And clearly, when you're in a monopoly position, you have a lot more, you have to be concerned about what happens with price in a monopoly situation as much as in a monopolistically competitive situation where pricing is a much bigger deal. And then the fifth C of the 5C framework is channel members, and probably the best way to think about this is when organizations are thinking about developing channels and things of that nature, it's really important that they align with and that the various intermediaries in the channel are kind of like on the same wavelength when it comes to pricing. So if we go back to company objectives, I mean, if you have one company that's really concerned with a kind of a profit orientation, and you've got another company that's concerned with or that focuses on a customer orientation, that might create some issues when it comes to pricing, because which channel members' wishes are going to be adhered to, or even more confusingly for a customer is what happens if, the one company decides that it's going to pursue its pricing objective and the other company decides it's going to pursue its pricing objective. How does that all play out how does that all play out in the end? So we've talked a little bit about pricing concepts, and we'll finish this up with a discussion of pricing strategies, which refers to an organization's long-term approaches to price. And the pricing strategies can be, divided into, or can be categorized into three main strategies. One is your primary focus is on cost. Second is your primary focus is on value, right? Third is your primary focus is on competitor. So, are you as an organization, are you going to pursue cost-based strategies? And the cost-based strategies, you might be looking at, so you have to have an understanding of your organization's cost, right? The fixed cost, the variable cost, and things of that nature, right? When you're looking at value, you have to have an understanding of, how your benefits can be greater than how the benefits can be greater than the costs, right? When you're looking at competitors, you have to have an understanding of, what it is that the competitors are doing. And so within those various strategies, there are a number of different tactics that can be used, and the tactics tend to be short-term approaches to allow organizations to, achieve their long-term goals. And one pricing tactic involves what is known as captive product pricing, and this refers to the pricing of a product that must be used with another product. So the question is, how do you price a product that has to be used with another product? And if you're a male, a classic example of captive product pricing is the razor/razor blades issue. And what oftentimes happens is that you can get a razor for relatively inexpensive cost. Where you get nailed if you're a guy is you get nailed with the price of the razor blades. Now I understand that has created a new market, right? There's the Dollar Shaves and Harry's, or I think it's Harry's Shaving or whatever it is, because of this captive product pricing that's been associated with razor blades, and the idea that you buy a particular kind of razor and then you're going to need blades for that razor, so we'll give you the razor relatively inexpensively, and we're just going to get you every time you come back for razor blades. And so that's called captive product pricing. The second type of pricing tactic is what is known as product bundle pricing, and this is where two or more complementary products are offered as a bundle, and the price of the bundle is less than if you bought the two or more products separately. So again, product bundle pricing refers to two or more complementary products that are offered as a bundle, and the price of the bundle is less than if the products were sold individually. So, if you go to a fast food restaurant and you have a value meal, that would be an example of product bundle pricing. Another example is a lot of the cable companies, right? You'll have cable service, you'll have telephone service, you'll have internet service, and the package of that, the three of those, tends to be less than if you were to buy each one of those separately. All right, so we've hit almost a 20-minute mark, and we will stop there. See ya.